Hi, my name is Laura Kelly. I am the chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, and I am an immigration attorney who's been practicing for over 11 years at this point. And I'm joined today with Chris Wills, a spokesperson for Keep Them Honest. And, well, you wear many, many hats. So, Chris, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And yeah, fighting on all fronts. We got to make sure that we start delivering some victories for our community because there's a lot of people hurting out there.
Absolutely. And I know that we're here today to talk about two new billboards that went up in Miami-Dade County. Tell me about these
Today,
billboards.
yes, this morning, we have two new billboards smack dab in the heart of Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart's district, Congressional District 26. And the billboards have a very simple message, one in English, one in Spanish. Mario Diaz-Balart, you betrayed us, nos traicionaste. And the message is basically a building on the message that's been out there through Keep Them Honest and other organizations that have been working to keep our members of Congress and our elected officials honest and hold them to account because unfortunately they've been missing in action, right? We've had right now, Mario Diaz-Balart sits in the congressional district where the Everglades Immigration Detention Center, which these cruel Republicans are calling Alligator Alcatraz, that's his district. And he's nowhere to be found. He doesn't speak about it. He has not shown up to any of the tours that have been held. And let alone has he taken action to try and actually shut down this cruel detention center that should absolutely be ended right now. Like literally, it is giving a terrible reputation to our community, to our state. And once again, the entire country, the world, is looking at what's happening in Florida and are aghast. And we are once again kind of a laughing stock, but also people are very scared about what's happening here, that we are dehumanizing folks the way we are with what's happening at that supposed Alligator Alcatraz.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. As an immigration attorney, as a human being, and as a constituent of Mario Diaz-Balart
Right.
in this district, I am highly concerned about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we had last week a number of state senators and state legislators try to visit the detention facility in the Everglades in order to check what was going on, who was detained there, and what the standards were. And they were turned away, and that in violation of statute.
Correct.
Right. So they filed a lawsuit, but eventually a contingent of various elected representatives were allowed to enter on I believe it was on Saturday.
Right.
What can you tell me about this visit?
So they were allowed in, but to say that it was an actual inspection or a tour is ridiculous. The fact that they were not allowed in with cameras to take pictures or video, when you have Secretary Kristi Noem went to CCOT and literally did a photo shoot in front of the prisoners that were, behind bars there, literally in a black hole where they may never come out of again. That our elected officials here were not given the opportunity to document what they saw is ridiculous. They were not allowed to speak directly to those who were being detained. And of course, statute has for a reason the ability for any state representative or state senator to at no notice show up at any state facility and inspect it. There's a reason that exists, because when you announce in advance that you're going to have a sitting elected official come and check you out, usually you're on much better behavior than you are day to day.
Right.
And so we know that it was not the normal procedures that were being followed that day. But even with that, the conditions that they saw there were absolutely deplorable, absolutely terrible, and they need to be denounced. And unfortunately, this has become such a partisan issue that never was partisan. The protection of immigrants, the protection of people's human rights has usually been a bipartisan thing. But we saw such a disparity between the truths that the Democrats saw there and conveyed to us through the media, through the press conference that they held, and then you had Republican state legislators like this guy Blazin Goglia, who used to be the RPOF chair, making jokes that the prisoners there were saying to vote for Trump, and that he lied down in the bed and it was more comfortable in the bed at his own home. I know Blazin Goglia very well, and he should be ashamed of the way that he spoke about those people, and the way he made jokes about what was going on. It's no joke.
It's absolutely not a joke. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that this detention facility being so remote, and also just the way that it's being run, has prevented attorneys and family members from even being in contact with the detainees. I believe we learned on Sunday that it was the Miami Herald that was actually able to get a list of detainees there, so that attorneys can find their clients and family members can find their clients. But that's not how it's supposed to be. When somebody is detained by ICE, we have something called the ICE detainee locator, where we can find where somebody is.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's extremely important, just for peace of mind as a family member.
Right.
As an attorney, it's important for me to know where I need to file things based on where my client is located.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's extremely important just for humanitarian reasons, that people are not disappeared within our own country.
Correct.
So that's extremely frightening, that they are not only being subject to less than humane conditions, and also they're being prevented from being in touch with their family members,
Mm-hmm.
most importantly, their attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously contrary to the rule of law and to the Constitution and numerous statutes. I think one of the problems with this particular detention facility is that it is not a federal detention facility,
Mm-hmm.
correct? It is a state facility.
So they're being very clever. They're saying it's a state-run facility that is holding ICE detainees. So, and they're trying to be, half cute, because obviously there are legal ramifications for everything that they're doing. And I certainly hope that every single one of the family members of those people that are being detained there sues the heck out of Ron DeSantis and everybody who's responsible for this, because there are lots of violations of the current law and basic human rights that are going on there. And you're absolutely right. They've been selling this story that it's just a temporary detention center. It's short term till they're actually deported. Well, there are folks that have been there for 11 days. And to your point, many of them had no access to their attorneys for all that time up until yesterday, 10 days. And so this is a real divergence from what separates the United States of America from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Nicaragua, right? My parents fled from Cuba and Venezuela. The disappearing of people, the denying them of the rights, that is what my family fled from. And we are seeing literally it happen here. And we have Republicans that are making jokes about it. And we did have Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar show up over the weekend, and oh well, people don't like to be in cages. Yeah, no, duh. You're literally stating the obvious, but what are you doing about it? And that's what the billboards and this whole campaign is all about. It's about putting pressure on them and telling them it's not enough for you to just speak out and post something on Twitter or send some letter. They have the power to stop this. They can literally put their foot down. The three of them, the Republicans hold such a narrow majority in the House. If they put their foot down and said, we're not voting for one more thing on the Trump agenda until you restore TPS for Venezuelans and Haitians, until you restore parole for Cubans, until you stop demonizing and terrorizing the Hispanic community and the immigrant community at large, they could actually get some concessions from the Trump administration if they actually tried. They haven't.
Yeah, they hold all of the leverage with that narrow majority in the House. And they should be using it. They're not using it. And I think that's part of the reason why you've been doing these, keep them honest, not you yourself, but keep them honest has been doing these billboard campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So like you mentioned, the initial campaigns had the three of them,
Mm-hmm.
Maria Elvira Salazar, Mario Diaz-Balart,
Mm-hmm.
and Carlos Jimenez
Correct.
as traitors. Why focus on Mario Diaz-Balart on these two billboards alone?
Well, like I said, first of all, the fact that this immigrant detention center in the Everglades, because I refuse to call it by the other name. That's what these cruel Republicans call it. It's in his district, and he's literally MIA, has not said anything, isn't doing anything about it. But also, it's important to note, right? In politics, seniority matters. Mario Diaz-Balart is the Republican member of Congress in Miami-Dade who has been serving in Congress the longest. He's been there longer than Jimenez. He's been there longer than María Elvira Salazar for sure. And not only does he have that seniority on them, so he should be the leader and actually, finding a way to actually protect immigrants, but he's also got his family's legacy to defend, right? The Diaz-Balart name in this community has always been known as a name that would defend immigrants, right? And because, like I said earlier, this didn't used to be a partisan thing, right?
Exactly.
I remind folks that back in 2000, when, in my opinion, President Clinton overstepped and ripped Elian Gonzalez out of his family's hands, it was Democrats in this community like Alex Penelas and Manny Diaz who were the strongest voices and said, this is wrong. We are not going to be quiet. And there's a lot of people to this day that believe that because Penelas spoke out so strongly and Diaz spoke out so strongly, Clinton's Vice President Gore loses Florida and loses the presidency, right? But they were not making those political calculations, which is what the Republicans are doing right now. They're making these political calculations at the cost of people's lives. And it's disgusting. And, when you have somebody like Diaz-Balart, again, whose family has always defended these rights, in a bipartisan way, he has to be held accountable for that family legacy that he's literally destroying.
Well, and not just his family legacy. What about the legacy of our country?
What
about the legacy of the Constitution?
Correct.
And it's troubling to see across the country elected officials trying to enter these detention facilities and being turned away, or in some cases arrested for exercising their rights to actually enter these facilities. But what alarms me as well is just the number of detentions. So the part of the reason why we have these substandard conditions in these detention facilities is there are too many people, and we're seeing people dying. We are seeing human beings dying because they're not getting medical treatment quickly enough. We're seeing that they're not getting their medications. This is something that is going on at Chrome Service Processing Center here, also in Miami-Dade County, also in Mario Diaz-Balart's district, by the way, as far I believe so. And I'm trying to remember Tamiami Trail and where that turns off, and maybe Carlos Jimenez's district. But the point is that as leaders, they have absolutely abandoned us and have been traitors to the community. Because what we're seeing in the past, that Cubans had a special standing in immigration where they could request Cuban adjustment by getting a parole. And now this is the craziest things that are happening with this administration. We're seeing people who entered the quote unquote correct way by going to a port of entry, requesting that they be allowed to enter in order to seek asylum. So we have people who have done that and then are put into removal proceedings in court to fight their asylum cases, but they've also received a parole. And now those people, even so, if they're Cuban, theoretically, they should be able to do Cuban adjustment after 1 year and 1 day. But they are, rather than allowing people to do that, they are actually dismissing cases in court and then detaining them and subjecting them, if they request it, to, well, first of all, they're subjected to what's called expedited removal, which means immediate removal. And the only way to stop that is to request credible fear. And many of them who do not have attorneys may not know that they can request credible fear. And even when they have attorneys, so this has happened to me in some of my cases, where we request credible fear, they get stuck in this limbo. And so we're having Cuban Americans who entered the right way, they actually do have a parole, being in this limbo situation. Or if they are in removal proceedings, because they entered at a port of entry, they're marked as what's called an arriving alien. That means they cannot do their adjustments of status to residency in court. They can only do it before USCIS. But in order to get out of court, they have to dismiss that case. But of course, once they dismiss that case, they're being
And they can be
detained.
detained. Yep.
So I just want, I mean, I really hope that the Cuban American community is listening to this is how they're treating not only Cubans who've come here seeking asylum. You know, we have these people who are legitimate asylum seekers. They just are also eligible for the Cuban Adjustment Act. You know, I've had clients that are Cuban with pending asylum applications have their cases dismissed and are now being detained. We are seeing this also with Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Hondurans. I mean, throughout the Haitians, of course, throughout the entire immigrant community. And part of that is there's a quota, right? You know the quota, like there's a quota.
And that's what you get when you set those arbitrary numbers like that, right? Go out and round up a couple thousand people every day. Doesn't matter how you do it. And that's unfortunately the inhumanity of the guy who's really running the White House, which is Stephen Miller, right? You know, Wiles is there as a figurehead, as you know, the chief of staff, but really it's the guy who devised the put kids in cages to deter people from crossing the border during the first Trump administration, and now has said, you know, we're going to go pick people up just because they're standing in front of Home Depot, right? Or because they look or sound, or we just suspect that they may be here in an illegal status. And we heard over the weekend, right, that FHP here is pulling people over. And I'll say this, it happened to me. I got pulled over by an officer who said that he couldn't see through my back window. That's why he pulled me over. Wasn't able to do anything because, you know, he ran my license, but it was pretty obvious to me that he was just fishing, right? They were trying to see, you know, I'm a Hispanic looking guy. I'm not the most Hispanic looking person, but, you know, Hispanic passing, half Cuban, half Venezuelan, but, you know, most people don't see it immediately when they see me. And, you know, they're just trying to see who they can catch. And FHP admitted they were pulling people over just based on their tints, right? And some of those people, right, because they were stopped for their tints, were actually sent to the Everglades Immigration Detention Center, and nobody had proof that they had committed any crime or were here illegally or anything before that happened. It was just they had that stop, there was a suspicion, they sent them there. So this notion that, you know, it's a place for the worst of the worst, and it's a place where folks are, you know, definitely going to be deported and they're imminently going to be deported, that is a blatant lie. And every Republican in the Florida House and Florida Senate knows it's a blatant lie, and they have the power to stop it, because the governor here is the governor. But at the end of the day, they are the folks that write the laws in the state. If they wanted to, Speaker Danny Perez could tomorrow call for a special session to write the laws necessary to shut down what's happening in the Everglades. And that is our call for him, and at the federal level for people like Mario Diaz-Balart. They could, again, also present laws, cut deals with the administration, put their foot down and take action, as previously people across party lines used to do, to defend what's right.
Absolutely. And instead, again, back to their leverage and our congressional delegation, rather than using their leverage, rather than fighting for our immigrant communities in not only in South Florida, but throughout the United States, they signed a bill, or they voted for a bill, that increased not only our deficit, but also the budget for ICE, in order to continue these detentions. And what I'm seeing is this quota is not a couple thousand, it's 3,000 per day to be detained. And what happens is when you run out of people to detain, that's when they go out on the streets looking for people based on how they look. Now, you mentioned something that you're, you know, like that you're not as Hispanic looking as maybe other people, but I would ask, what does a Hispanic person look like? Right. We don't know that.
Well, I'm Christopher Alexander Wills, half Cuban, half Venezuelan, right? Like in today's day and age, you just don't know. And it's insulting that they are profiling in this way. Like, we were saying before the program started, that Holman is out there basically trying to justify, yes, let's profile. And
well, he didn't just justify. He actually said that DHS, that ICE has the ability to stop people without probable cause just based on how they look. And again, you can't tell whether somebody is a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident or have some other non-immigrant visa or be an undocumented immigrant by the way that they look. You cannot. And what he's talking about is not only, racial profiling in the worst way, but also playing into stereotypes that are not true about our community. Right. But what it means is the browner you are, the more likely it is that you're going to be stopped, and they're going to take you and ask questions later, which should be terrifying not only to brown and black U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and immigrants, but also every single one of us. Because like you said, if they're going after tents, like people with dark tint or they can't see behind, then they're using that as a justification to pull over anybody. And yeah, for some people, they may say it's a 10-minute stop. Those are your constitutional rights that are being violated.
Yep.
Whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, or you get sent to a detention facility, because they're making mistakes. U.S. citizens are being detained.
Correct. Yep.
And so I think what people don't understand about due process and why it applies to everybody, and again, the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment says persons, not citizens.
Right.
Everybody is entitled to due process. That when you give up your rights, you lose them forever. And you may think it's somebody else losing them, but they are our rights. When it says persons and we're saying, no, that doesn't apply to certain persons,
right, we
all lose.
Yep.
We all lose.
Yeah. And none of us can allow it to happen, right? We need to do everything we can in our power, whether that's contacting your member of Congress, contacting your state representative or state senator, because I think also part of this is we can't let it be lost in the conversation that each of us has a state representative and a state senator who has some power in this process too, right? Again, that detention center out in the Everglades is a state-run facility. If your state representative and state senator is not vociferously opposing it and calling for it to be shut down, then all of us need to know that these betrayals that Mario Diaz-Balart has perpetrated on us, that Danny Perez, the Speaker of the House, has perpetrated on us, that your state rep or state senator, if they're on the Republican side, because all the Democrats have voted against this stuff very, very much so, and have tried to fight it as best they can in Tallahassee. That's just the reality. But the Republicans have literally been complicit in all of this, and we need to make sure that this betrayal is remembered next year at the polls. But also, I put it out there to folks, right? If you are a registered NPA or a registered Republican who is upset, and there's a lot of them who are upset about what's going on, there is one thing you can do right now that would send a very clear message. If the Republican Party starts seeing thousands and tens of thousands and lots of people switching away from the Republican Party and registering as Democrats, they will start shaking in their boots. And that is something you can do today. It takes 5 minutes to do. Register to vote Florida.gov, and you can literally change your voter registration status as often as you'd like. But if you are upset right now, that is something you can do right now to send a message.
I do the same thing. I say the same thing. This is how you send a message and let them know that what they want most, which is to be reelected, is not going to happen in 2026.
Right.
And I also wanted to talk about just really quickly that this is a state-run facility. It is on county land, right, county-owned land, but the state used the emergency procedures in order to basically take this land from the county.
Right.
And my understanding is, well, not my understanding, I know that this emergency powers was through a document that the governor signed back in 2023 and has continued to expand it by saying that there is an immigration emergency in South Florida, and they've used those powers to take this land away from the county. And if we are wanting to put pressure on the county to file a lawsuit or doing something like that, it requires all 7 commissioners to agree to that. And so if there's any pressure going to be put on the county level, I would suggest that it's at the commissioner level, especially the commissioner that I believe has jurisdiction over that detention facility is J.C. Bermudez,
That's
correct?
correct. Yep. He's a former mayor of Doral. And look, if there's one area of Miami-Dade County that should feel among the most betrayed right now, it is the Doral area, Doralzuela, right? And it's not because I'm half Venezuelan. It's just the fact, right, that you have the sitting Secretary of State who has spoken vociferously for years about, toppling the communist regimes in Cuba and Venezuela. That Marco Rubio is the person that wrote the letter to Secretary Noem to cancel TPS for Venezuelans is unforgivable.
Absolutely.
That they have literally torn out the rug from underneath so many of these Venezuelans who have built their businesses there. And that's who they started with, right? That's, if we remember back to last year's election, it was, all Venezuelans are Tren de Aragua, and it kept going on past January 20th. As soon as Trump got inaugurated, they made Venezuelans a major target. Now it's expanded, right? And so everybody's being caught up in the same net, Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, everybody's being affected by this, at least on the Hispanic side. It's interesting that they pointed out at the Everglades Detention Center, we have a significant amount of Russian immigrants in Miami-Dade County. We have people from other, European nations that have immigrated here, but everybody at the Everglades Detention Center is Hispanic.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting.
What's also interesting is when we talk about these the detentions, and I know we're running out of time, but I want to be very, very precise about this, is that they're not going after people who have criminal convictions or criminal charges. So there are people who've been charged with crimes and people who have been convicted of crimes, but that is not the majority of the people who have been detained on the nation side
At all.
or the people being detained at this detention facility in the Everglades known as Alligator Alcatraz, correct?
So in the Republicans that toured this facility in the Everglades this weekend, they, in their own words, said they saw 6 of the nearly 1,000 men that are there with the red wristband, which represents the worst of the worst. Yep. 6 out of 1,000.
And let me be clear, some people may say that just being here without documents means that they're a criminal, and that is not the case.
Correct.
That entering the United States without permission certainly is a criminal violation. It's a misdemeanor. It's a federal misdemeanor. It has a statute of limitations of 5 years. But entering the United States also with the parole, like I was mentioning, many people have that are not going to be able to exercise that parole, is not a crime. And overstaying a visa is not a crime. And also the people, thousands of people who came here legally through the humanitarian parole program who have been stripped of their status by this administration. They have violated no criminal laws whatsoever, and they are in danger of detention.
Yeah, and so many that, like you said, have lost their status and have been here for decades, right? And there's a gentleman that there was a story that he travels to Canada every single year, and now for the first time he can't get back in because he had some kind of DUI or whatever decades ago, but they're using that to cancel his green card, right?
Wow.
So this is the reality that people are facing. And we heard it over the weekend. The president of the United States threatened to take away the citizenship of an American citizen that he doesn't like, right? That's the world we're living in right now. And that's why everybody needs to wake up, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to keep them honest. And I certainly hope that everybody that's watching today joins us in this effort to reach out to your member of Congress, the folks in Tallahassee, your county commissioner, and make sure that they are doing everything in their power to do what's right and defend this community, defend the immigrants who have built this country and continue to build Miami-Dade County.
Thank you so much for that, Chris. And if people want to learn more about Keep Them Honest, how can they reach them?
So the website is keepthemhonestnow.com, and more billboards to come very soon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us in this spirited conversation, important issues, and we'll speak to you next time. Have a great day.